I never expected first contact to be polite. When the human race finally confirmed that intelligent life existed beyond Earth, most of us assumed it would be catastrophic, an invasion, a cold war of technology, or, at the very least, a cultural collision that would leave both sides wary. But nothing prepared me for the quiet smile that greeted me the moment I stepped into the alien vessel. I had been selected for the Observer mission, a program designed to facilitate communication with species whose technology had already surpassed our own. I wasn't a soldier, a diplomat, or even a linguist. I was just an astrophysicist who spent most of my time thinking about quasars and dark matter. Somehow, that qualified me for first contact. The craft hovered silently over the Nevada desert at dawn. It was vast, its metallic hull shimmering with colors I didn't even know existed, and its shape was almost organic, like a living sculpture shaped by centuries of evolution rather than human engineering. I stepped forward, feeling the crunch of desert sand beneath my boots, and the hatch opened with a hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. Inside, the ship was both familiar and alien. Surfaces gleamed like liquid metal, and soft bioluminescent lights pulsed rhythmically along the walls. The air smelled faintly sweet, a scent that somehow made me both anxious and calm. And then I saw her. She was standing at the center of the chamber, taller than any human, with a presence that seemed to bend the very light around her. Her skin shimmered faintly, like molten silver, and her eyes were impossibly deep, like they contained entire galaxies within them. And then she smiled. It wasn't a cautious, polite smile. It wasn't the tentative grin of someone unsure if they should trust me. It was a smile that felt like recognition, like she had been waiting for me all along. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice melodic, resonating in my mind rather than my ears. Somehow, I understood her perfectly, though no words passed through the air. I don't even know where to start," I stammered, unsure whether to bow, wave, or just stand there like an idiot. She tilted her head slightly, observing me. Then, after a pause that stretched for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds, she asked something that made my blood run cold. "Do you dream in sequences or in possibilities?" It wasn't a question about science, about physics, or about the human condition. It was something I had never even considered asking myself. I blinked. I'm not sure I understand," I said, realizing that my voice sounded far more timid than I felt. Her smile widened, and in that moment, the room seemed to expand. "Few humans ever have," she said. "Most see reality as a single thread, but your species is capable of more." She stepped closer. Her movements were fluid, almost too precise to be natural, and yet they carried an elegance that was completely uncalculated. I noticed that every surface she touched seemed to hum, not with sound, but with energy. "I need to know," she continued, "because the path we take depends on your answer." Her words weren't threatening, but the weight of them pressed against my mind like gravity. I had studied alien behavior extensively. I knew that any misunderstanding could be fatal, yet I felt compelled. "I dream in sequences," I admitted cautiously, moments unfolding one after another. She nodded, almost as if I had given the correct answer. "Then we must teach you to see otherwise," she said. And then she smiled again. It was the kind of smile that made me feel like the universe itself had just whispered its secrets to me. Over the next several hours, or perhaps days, time was strange aboard her ship. She showed me things I could scarcely describe. She called it the network of possibilities. At first, it was visual, a lattice of shimmering threads that connected past, present, and potential futures. I could see countless outcomes of every decision, every action, every thought I had ever had or might have. The threads weren't linear. They twisted, collided, and recombined in patterns that felt alive. Most humans cannot perceive this, she said. You're still bound by sequential thought. But you can learn. I tried. I concentrated, focusing on my past dreams, on the choices I had made, and then on the myriad possibilities I had ignored. Slowly, painfully, I began to see the threads, not clearly, not completely, but enough. Enough to understand that the universe wasn't a straight line. It was a web. Why show me this? I asked finally, my voice trembling. Why me? She knelt. Or did she fold, her form bending impossibly as she regarded me? Because you are the first human capable of understanding. Because your species is at a crossroads. Because you are ready. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to cry. The weight of her gaze pressed on me like nothing I had ever felt. And then she did something that no human or perhaps any being had ever done before. She smiled. And then she asked a question I could not have imagined in a million lifetimes. Will you help us rewrite the rules of existence? It wasn't a question about morality. It wasn't about science. It was an invitation. I hesitated, my mind spinning. Rewrite existence? Yes, she said. The universe is not fixed. It is a canvas. And we're the first to realize it. Will you paint with us? I swallowed hard. My training, my knowledge, my instincts, all screamed at me to run, to refuse, to retreat. And yet, something deeper, something primal, answered her call. Yes, I whispered. What followed was beyond comprehension. She taught me to manipulate the threads of possibility, to influence outcomes without breaking causality, to see futures as simultaneously existing yet malleable. I learned that reality was not a cage, but a symphony, an intricate composition in which consciousness could play a note, and the universe would resonate in response. We moved through landscapes that were not fixed, mountains that rippled like water, oceans that shimmered with the light of 1,000 suns, skies that flowed like liquid glass. I experienced lifetimes in minutes, centuries in hours, and yet I remained anchored to myself, human, but forever changed. And through it all, she was there, guiding, smiling, questioning, never demanding, always revealing. Her presence was a paradox, at once alien and intimately familiar, like a memory I had never lived but somehow knew. At some point, I realized that I was no longer just observing. I was participating. The threads of possibility responded to me, bending, twisting, reshaping themselves in ways that were both terrifying and exhilarating. I also realized that the mission was not just about me. It was about humanity. She had chosen me because she needed a bridge, someone who could understand, and then bring knowledge back to Earth. But she also warned me that most humans might not comprehend what I had learned, might reject it, might even destroy it out of fear. "Are you afraid?" she asked one day, though it felt more like a song than words. Terrified, I admitted. She smiled, and in that smile, I understood something profound. "Then you are ready," she said. Eventually, I had to return. The ship descended silently into the desert again, and she walked me to the hatch. I expected goodbyes, handshakes, perhaps even a formal farewell. But she did something far more human and far more alien. She smiled. And then she asked something no human had ever heard. "Will you remember me? Not just in thought, but in possibility?" I will," I said, understanding the depth of her request. She wasn't asking for memory. She was asking for influence, for continuity, for me to carry forward the understanding of the network of possibilities into the world of linear, sequential humans. Her eyes shimmered with a light that made the stars themselves seem dim. Then she stepped back, the hatch closed, and the craft lifted silently into the sky, disappearing into the dawn. I stood there for hours afterward, staring at the empty sky. The desert felt smaller, the world narrower, yet somehow infinitely more alive. And I realized that my life had changed in ways I could not yet articulate. I had touched the threads of reality itself, guided by a being whose smile had broken every expectation I had ever held about first contact, about intelligence, about life itself. When I returned to civilization, I tried to explain. Words failed me. Diagrams failed me. Even my scientific colleagues, brilliant though they were, looked at me like I had lost my mind. But I didn't care. I had seen the possibilities. I had learned to dream not in sequences, but in infinite, shimmering webs. And sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep, I smile, and I whisper a promise into the threads of reality. I will remember. And somewhere, out in the vastness of space, I imagine her smiling back. I returned to Earth carrying more than memories. I carried knowledge, perception, and a perspective no human had ever held. The days that followed were surreal. The sky seemed duller, the wind slower, the familiar sights of my city muted, as if the planet itself was unaware of the threads I had glimpsed. I could no longer see the world the same way. Every choice, every action, even the faintest thought, shimmered with unseen possibilities. I tried to explain it to others, but words fell short. My colleagues listened politely, nodding as though humoring an eccentric scientist, yet I could see their minds wrestling against the unimaginable. That was when I realized something vital. The knowledge I carried was dangerous, not because it was weaponized, but because humanity wasn't ready to perceive reality beyond sequences. Most would dismiss it. Some might fear it. But I could not forget, and I could not go back. And yet, in my private moments, I could still feel her presence. It was subtle, like a vibration in the threads of reality, a gentle reminder that the universe was alive, vast, and full of possibilities. When I closed my eyes, I could see the lattice of intertwined futures, every path I had glimpsed, every moment I had touched. And always, somewhere in that web, her smile awaited me, calm and knowing. Months passed. Slowly, I began to integrate what I had learned into my work. I wrote papers that seemed incomprehensible at first, but hinted at new ways of perceiving time, probability, and consciousness. I designed simulations of reality that went beyond mere physics, attempts to model the network of possibilities she had shown me. And every time I succeeded, even slightly, I imagined her watching, approving, smiling. But more importantly, I lived differently. I no longer feared uncertainty. I understood that mistakes were not failures, but threads weaving into other possibilities. I took chances I would have never taken before. I spoke to people with empathy, seeing not just their actions but the myriad possibilities that had led them there. I laughed more freely, and I dreamed, not in sequences, but in infinite, shimmering webs. Years later, when humanity finally glimpsed signs of intelligent alien life again, I was ready. Not just with knowledge or technology, but with understanding. I knew the moment would come when someone else, perhaps another human, would meet her or one like her, and ask questions no human had dared to imagine. And I knew what to tell them. To see, to feel, to remember that reality is not a line, but a tapestry, and that even one consciousness can shape its threads. And in the quiet hours, when the world slept and the stars blazed cold and distant, I still whispered to the threads. I remember you. I remember your smile. I carry the possibilities forward as you asked. And somewhere, across the immeasurable expanse of space, I knew she smiled again. That single, simple gesture, silent, unbroken, infinite, reminded me that first contact wasn't an event. It was a promise that humanity had a place in the web of existence if only we dared to see it. And with that promise, I finally understood what she had truly asked all along. Not for obedience, not for knowledge, not for power, but for the courage to see beyond ourselves and to carry that vision forward into every choice, every life, every thread of possibility we touched. The universe had opened its door, and in her smile, I had stepped through.